how we understand the legacies of the civil rights movement depends on how we remember the movement itself. If we remember it as being confined to the South, as being just about legalized segregation and voting rights, then its legacy looks pretty simple. It succeeded. It removed a terrible stain from American democracy. If we remember it as being broader and wider and deeper and longer than that, then its legacy looks very different. We have so much research now that shows that the movement was not confined to the South. It was national in scope. It was as much about economic equality as it was about legal rights. And even more broadly than that, when you talk to civil rights veterans, again and again, they describe their aspirations not in those narrow ways, but as Martin Luther King put it, as a radical reconstruction of society aimed at giving all human beings an opportunity to live dignified and flourishing lives. Dignity is a word that comes up all the time. By the 1970s, the whole landscape had been changed by the civil rights movement. The South was lifting itself out of poverty, had the most integrated schools in the country. The income gap between blacks and whites was closing. A vibrant black middle class had emerged. At the same time, activists were coming up against old barriers and new barriers. Some of those barriers were structural. There were the ways in which inequality had been built into, say, housing segregation, so that it was more and more, it was almost impossible to desegregate the schools in the North. But also changes in the way people remembered and used the civil rights movement. And as people began to think of the civil rights movement as being a narrow, and to embrace the civil rights movement as a narrow, moderate effort to bring about colorblind laws, then that undergirded new court decisions and new public policies that undermined the very remedies that had been put in place to address the wrongs targeted by the civil rights movement. So that because of those barriers, today we see the income gap growing again. We see poverty on the rise. We see public sector unions, which had been invigorated by the civil rights movement and where so many blacks and women had gotten jobs for the first time, under attack. And finally, we see a new kind of segregation emerging, the mass incarceration of black men that's decimating black families and communities. So we should celebrate the success of the civil rights movement, but we should also remember that we're far from achieving its goals.